Dido is a very small episode in the Aeneid by Virgil, and it is the time when Aeneas has escaped from Troy, having been defeated by the Greeks, and he takes his father and his son and his band of followers away from Troy, and has a whole series of ghastly adventures, finally lands up in Carthage, where Dido is queen, and Dido makes him very welcome, and they fall in love. And it's absolutely tragic, because Aeneas' destiny is not to stay in Carthage with Dido. It is to go on to found a new Troy, which will eventually become Rome, because the reason the Aeneid is so important is that Virgil wrote it as an epic which would trace the origins of Rome back to Aeneas and show how Augustus, who was his patron at the time, was in fact related right back to Aeneas, the founder of ancient Rome. And so, unfortunately, Aeneas can't stay with Dido. He has to leave to go and fulfill his destiny, but Dido doesn't take this very well, and Dido kills herself. So that is actually only one book out of 12 books of the Aeneid, and that story is the basis of the Purcell opera and the Marlowe
I'm the person who's made all the puppets and the costumes. So they start off with polystyrene, and then they're coated in a thing called jasmonite, which is a bit like a fiberglass. It's a water-based one, so it's not so difficult, it's not so horrible to work with, and it gives a bit of a tough finish. And the polystyrene is to try and keep them light. I think it's going really well. I think it's when the singers and the actors, particularly the main characters, they've worked on them the longest, and when they just completely believe that the puppet is alive and they just kind of live through the puppet and they're sort of transfixed with it, that's when it works. Yeah, and it's what you can communicate through a puppet that is why I want to do it. I didn't want to make puppets for kids as a sort of job. I just saw how it worked, and then it just really moved me, and I happened to do things that were very moving subjects, so just saw the power of what they can do.
I'm the music director. I'm one of the two music directors on this production. I think it's going fantastic. I mean, it's incredibly moving because of the way we're doing it. The piece was originally written to be just sung straight through. So what we've done is add. What the director's done is add the words of a play about the same subject in to sort of break it all up and everything. So when we did the concert performances, we just did the music, but when we're doing this, we're doing it with all the interjections, and actually the piece works brilliantly by itself. And so we were all, it's fair to say, sceptical, but we were all interested to know how it would work, sort of pulling it out and adding all these extra bits. But it's incredibly powerful, and that's very good. And having our first live audience last night was quite revelatory. So scary.
Maybe another one.
My name is Yolanda Vasquez, and I'm playing Dido. I'm acting Dido through Dido Puppet. It's really enjoyable. It's interesting, it's hard, harder than I thought it was going to be, but very enjoyable. Hard because all your focus, or all my focus, is going into the puppet, whereas normally when I'm acting, I'm focusing on myself and out to the public. And this is almost as if going through the puppet, out to the public. So that's quite hard. At the same time, it's a little bit like patting your head and rubbing your tummy, because it's you're focusing on the puppet working and doing all the actions that you would do yourself, but are unable to do because you're holding on to the puppet. What is it like? Sometimes I'm sure it can be a little bit confusing for both of us, because we are cutting in the singing with the acting, the Purcell with the Marlowe quite closely. So it's we have to bounce off each other. And it works, and when it works well, it works brilliantly. But again, you need an immense amount of concentration. It's just stunning. I think that Tim has done a fantastic job with this. I think it's a great idea to have both the opera and part of the play together. I think it's It's wonderful.
I'm Tim Carroll and I've directed this production of Dido and Aeneas. About 2 years ago, after we did Midsummer Night's Dream, I talked with the then chief executive of the company about what we might do next, and we both agreed that we loved Purcell's Dido and Aeneas, but that it was a pity it was so short and sold some of the characters short, such as Aeneas. And I had recently directed Marlowe's play, Dido, Queen of Carthage, so I said to him, perhaps the two pieces could, as it were, complete each other. That's the idea anyway. The interesting thing is always with a project like this, is working with a company that isn't used to doing opera or even theatre. So of course we're all making it up as we go along, who should be doing what and how we get everything together, and having to pull it all together when it's pretty much a fully staged performance, trying to pull it together in the time you would have to put together a concert. I've become quite a devotee of puppets because I really found, from the first time I worked with them, I found that they have a kind of purity and simplicity of intention, which is really a good discipline, I think, for all the people around them. It brings out the best in all of us and the audience. I think I was pondering a long time what the nature of the witches might be, and I just found myself intrigued by the sort of Frankenstein's monster sense of a disembodied evil spirit under the sea whose power to affect things on land is severely circumscribed, and so it's as though she is trying to send out her emissaries into the world to create evil, and only when evil is created can they come together for a brief moment of celebration. I think there's a real potential for it to be hypnotic and magical.